Hello and welcome to another episode of the Flip Bama Flip podcast. I'm your host, Victoria, and I'm getting ready to head to finals in just a couple of hours, but I've had some time to think about semifinals since Thursday. I know I posted a couple of quick thoughts after. Just really tired and bewildered after the second semifinal. So I'm just glad I got coherent sentences out. But now that I've had a chance to kind of sit back and think about it, I've also had a bunch of discussions with some of my friends about what happened on Thursday and just their thoughts overall on the season. And there's been a couple of things that we've talked about and kind of floated to the surface that I think are really interesting, especially when we compare the teams that made it and the teams that didn't. And one of the first things that stood out was where a team ceiling is, because we had a number of teams that had high ceilings that didn't make it to nationals or didn't make it to national finals versus a team like Minnesota. Minnesota's never scored in the 198s. They are kind of relatively new to the 197 club, but they have managed to hit their stride and they've become the team that just simply doesn't make a lot of mistakes. So it doesn't mean that they're perfect on their routines, obviously, but they're not going to have a fall. They're not going to have a missed routine that they are like, we really need to drop this score because if we have to count this, we're in trouble. And what that does is it puts pressure on the other teams to hit because they don't have the room for error. If they have to count a fall like what UCLA did and have to count some low scores, Minnesota just kind of keeps plugging away. It's kind of almost the tortoise and the hare a little bit. They're kind of the tortoise in the sense that they just keep going and they keep getting, nine nines. They're not getting tens. They're not getting, a ton of 9.975s, but they're getting 9.9s. They're getting above 9.9. They're getting high 9.8s. And they're just plugging away and keeping their foot on the gas pedal and putting pressure on the other teams. And pressure does a funny thing to people. Some people, it makes them overthink it. They try too hard, and that can lead to errors. And so I think that's kind of been their formula. But it raises the question of, is it better to have a really high ceiling like a UCLA that has scored above 198, I think 3 times this season, but doesn't necessarily do so consistently, because then what happens if you don't hit that ceiling in the moments that matter the most, like semifinals? Or is it better to have a little bit of a lower ceiling? And that's not to say that Minnesota has a low ceiling. You wouldn't be in the finals if they had a low ceiling. So don't think I'm saying that. But they have a lower ceiling. If everybody today, out of the 4 teams today, does their best, Minnesota will finish fourth. They just have the lowest ceiling of all the teams that are competing today. But they have, at least lately, been very, very consistent. And that's going to put pressure on the other teams. So again, the question is kind of, which is better? Is it better to be able to score high, but not necessarily do it consistently and risk having an off day and an off meet when it counts the most? Or is it better to have a lower ceiling, but be able to hit it relatively consistently so that you become the team that puts pressure on the other teams and can capitalize on the mistake the other teams make? And so it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out today, because I think that of the 4 teams, Minnesota is that way. I think LSU and Florida are probably the teams that I'm kind of like, I don't know. I don't know which Florida team will show up. I don't know which LSU team will show up. They've had highs, they've had lows. As far as qualifying, Oklahoma qualified in the first spot, Florida qualified in the second spot. Minnesota actually qualified in the third spot, and LSU was the last team to qualify and kind of squeaked in there past Georgia. Georgia really gave them a run for their money, and it came down to the last routines before uh, figuring it out and really qualifying for finals. So that's a really interesting conversation that I've had the past couple of days. And the other one is this idea of superstars. And so I went and I looked at the top 3 all-arounders and kind of what did that mean for their teams and where did they shake out? So your top all-arounder is, Kalen Gio of LSU, and as I just said, LSU was the last team to qualify in. Then you had Jordan Childs of UCLA. UCLA did not make it in. And your third highest all arounder, and this is for the regular season, this isn't the individual results. We know Faith Torres actually won the all around despite not competing in the all around all season. But Avery Neff came in as number 3, and she was part of Utah. Utah got knocked out at the regional finals level. And so I think it's really kind of comes down to a simple math issue in that there is a cap for how much an individual can contribute to the team. So let's say you have the ultimate meet and you score a perfect 10 on all 4 rotations. That's 40 points. That's all you can do. You don't get to score a 12, at least not in the college scoring system, in elite. And in men's college, they do that where they do a difficulty score and an execution score. And you can score 14, you can score those. But in women's college gymnastics, 10 is as good as it gets. So even if you are super great, like Kayla Gio or like Jordan Childs or Avery Neff, there's a limit to how much you can contribute. This is very different than basketball. So I grew up right outside of Chicago, and in 1990s, when the Bulls were winning everything and Michael Jordan was playing, I watched those games religiously. And there were games, I mean, everybody remembers there were games where Michael Jordan just decided, like, we're not losing, and you would just see him take over and score 50, 60 points. Um, there's no limit to what he could do other than the time constraints, of course. But in gymnastics, there is. You can only get a 10 on a routine. And so, can having that superstar, can they make up for the other gymnasts that have come before them? And I think what we're seeing is that even though having the superstar gymnast it gets a lot of attention. These are the gymnasts we talk about a lot, that gymnasts numbers 3, 4, 5, and 6 in the lineup, meaning the ones that come first, they are just as important as your top and your second top gymnast in a lineup. Again, because there is a limit to how much they can help. And I think what we're seeing is that teams that have to wait until their third or sometimes even their fourth gymnast to get into that 9-9 range, they're the teams that are not making it to finals. Because again, we're talking about the top 4 teams in the country. So we're not just talking about really good teams. We're not even really talking about great teams. We're talking about the elite teams. And these elite teams have full lineups that are capable, or at least almost full lineups that are capable of 9-9s. And we saw that with Oklahoma in their vaulting. And granted, that was even unusual for them to be that dialed in, but they had 5 of their 6 gymnasts scored a 9-9 or above. And so they didn't have to count a score lower than, I think it was like a 9-9-3-7-5, something like that. That's going to be amazing. Their rotation score was like a 49-7 or something like that. That's insane. And so a team like an Arkansas or a Georgia that we saw, or Stanford, who were having to wait until they got to their third or even their fourth gymnast to start cracking into the 9-9s, you're just not going to be able to keep pace with a team that can put up a 9-9 either in that leadoff position or even in that second position. And so, as much attention as these superstars get, there's a sense that the rest of the lineup is just as, if not even more important to the overall team score than that superstar who has the potential to put up a 10. And again, we're seeing this in Minnesota. Their gymnast, I don't know that anybody on Minnesota has gotten a 10 this season, but when they got on vault, not on vault, but on beam, and they started on beam, and you started to see these 9-9s early on. And again, they're just the team that's going to keep plugging away. Then they finished that rotation in a great spot and were able to keep that momentum going. But again, they don't have a flashy gymnasts. They have some leaders. They have some specialists that do well on certain events, but they really are a team of gymnasts that are able to perform well versus maybe relying on kind of a superstar to make up ground for the rest of the lineup. And for me, I think what we saw is that the danger with that is what happens if your superstar just has an off day? And everybody has an off day. And I mean, there's been so much talk about Jordan Childs and the fact that she came off the bars. How often do we see that? I mean, she's entitled to having an off meet. And so some of the criticism, and thankfully it hasn't been a lot, and I kind of get the sense from things that I've read that most of the criticism is from people who don't actually really follow the sport and just want to get clicks or to kind of start a controversy. I think most people understand that Jordan Childs has consistently performed at such a high level, and that even the best gymnasts have an off day, and it was a bad day to have a bad day, but it happened. But I wonder if, again, kind of having that and maybe having to rely on her to uh, have those high scores to maybe make up for some misses early on, whether or not that's a strategy. Obviously, it worked to some degree. They made it to national semifinals. They have scores in the 198s. But whether that's a riskier way to the top, because you are relying on people to have always consistently have those really, really great meets. And again, this isn't to say that UCLA doesn't have any other great athletes. I mean, that's just insane. They have great athletes. Their lineups are wonderful. They just, I think, are inconsistent. And so sometimes in the 9-9, sometimes not. And so it just raises those questions that I thought were really interesting. So we'll be heading back, like I said, to finals this afternoon. And I will say this, if you have not had the opportunity to go to a meet live, please do yourself a favor. Find a way next season to get to a meet, because every time I go to the meets in person, it always strikes me that there is just something that doesn't seem to translate to TV. It looks higher, it looks faster, it looks way more powerful. Even the skills that are kind of floaty and beautiful, they still look just so much better in person. So I say go ahead, treat yourself next season, find a way to get to a meet. My goal is to find a way to get to an Alabama meet during the regular season. I'm going to have to coordinate with my husband and my kiddos and find a way to kind of sneak off for a home meet, because I so miss seeing the team in Coleman. But do yourself a favor, go to a meet. Find a way to get there. You will have a new appreciation for the sport, or a reappreciation for the sport, because it really is fantastic to see it in person. And so we'll be back next week. We'll talk more about finals, and what we thought and kind of what we think that means for Alabama moving forward. We'll start talking about the seniors that are leaving us. I've been dreading those podcasts. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to face the music of our seniors leaving us, but I think we need to talk about them and kind of sing their praises and thank them for everything that they've done for the program, and then start looking ahead. And if you've been following us on socials, you'll see I'm posting a lot of stuff about what the incoming class is doing, or future commits. We have some commits that aren't coming in next season, but the season after. But what they're doing at the regional level, we need to get excited for next season, because we've got some really, really great gymnasts coming in, and seeing what they're doing again at the regional level, and a lot of them qualifying to nationals. It's a thing of beauty. So like the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of that. Follow us on the socials, so you can keep up in one location with what's going on with the current team, what's going on with the future recruits. And we'll be back to talk about the end of the season. All right. Until next time, Roll Tide.